The Wild Poor Dog podcast this week was sponsored by Dogs Today magazine, the ethical pet magazine for people who really care about dogs. www.dogstodaymagazine.co.uk.
It doesn't matter if you're an experienced dog owner, if you've just got your first puppy this summer, or you're thinking about buying a dog. There's something we can all do to make the life we share with our dogs better.
In this week's show, we're going to talk about talking dog, how to communicate best with your dog and make them the happiest pet you can make them. We also have an interview with well-known entrepreneur and investor Deborah Meaden from UK's Dragon's Den.
So Karen, do you talk to your dogs?
I do, and I sing to them sometimes as well.
What do you sing?
Well, we just make it up as we go along. So, perhaps, for example, I was stroking Lola, who's a Vizslas, the other day, and I was sort of cuddling her, and I can hear a tail thumping in the background.
Yes, that's right. Today it's a two-dog room here. I've got Digby and Aggie.
This is the dubstep version of the podcast, everybody. I do sing. I sing just anything. So I was sort of rubbing Lola's head and scratching her under the chin and rubbing her ears, and she's looking at me, and I just sing to her. And it's not really anything. It doesn't mean anything to her, I'm sure, but she doesn't try and get away, so it can't be that bad. But I just, you just do, and it's all part of why I've got dogs. Really, is that I don't have a problem with, giving my dog affection that they enjoy. If they're enjoying it as well and I'm enjoying it, that's part of having a pet dog. And I never discourage people from doing that, in the sense that as long as the dog is doing what you want and as long as they're enjoying it, then it's fine and it doesn't hurt them. Then it's probably mutually beneficial, and it has been shown to be quite a big health benefit for people. So I'm not saying, free affection and just fuss them all the time when they're not doing what you want. That's not quite the same thing. But I don't go all school marmish over it at all. How about you? Do you sing? I bet you don't sing to your dogs, do you?
No, I don't sing, but I talk to them a lot. Bassets are very talkative dogs. They're all particularly Tia and Digby. They'll come and sort of stick their face close to my face and will want to. So I like that. I think that's for me, my dogs are they mean so much to me and are such an active part of my life. They're such they're family members. So we have a chat.
And I think I think that we rely very heavily, don't you think, on commands. The dog should understand our words and they should know exactly what we mean when we speak to them. And I do think that whilst that's important when you're training, and if you want a specific thing to happen, then you need to attach some sort of cue to it, and that can be anything. That could be just a body movement, for example. But I do think we get a little bit arrogant as humans in expecting other species to do things as we want them to do things. And I think one of the biggest interests I have in dogs is learning to do things in a way that they understand naturally. They understand tones of voice and that sort of thing, so let's not pretend that they don't pick up on those kinds of things, because of course they do. But I do think we underestimate how much dogs really read what we're doing all the time. It's actually quite spooky. If you ever are in a room with your dog and you're sort of moving around, they are really monitoring what you're doing. They're keeping an eye on how things are going, possibly for their own benefit, not necessarily for yours, but they do keep an eye on you all the time. And this is something I've talked quite a lot about in my book, which is coming out in October. One of the skills is communication, and communication is a two-way thing. So it's not just about what you're trying to get the dog to understand, or necessarily what they're trying to get you to understand. That's your two-way thing. It's things that are going on, under the radar, if you like, that are happening all the time, and that can teach a dog an awful lot.
I'm very, very, very aware of how, particularly Winnie, she's super eagle-eyed and has really, really picked up on any of my movements. There are certain things that I do and I can tell that she knows she even almost anticipates it. It's almost like she's there before I've realized that I was doing it myself.
Yeah, there must be little giveaways. I think if we all videoed ourselves, if we all did a Big Brother style filming, you would be able to rewind that and see there would be signals that you're giving off, and they're not necessarily signals that we give off. There are other contextual things, like the time of day. Is the dog starting to feel hungry? Is the light changing outside? And sometimes, if it suddenly goes dark for a thunderstorm or something like that, perhaps or just goes very, very cloudy all of a sudden, you'll see the dogs kind of looking a bit, well, this isn't normal. So they do have some kind of timetable in their minds. And I think many exchanges are based on sort of mutual predictions of each other's behaviour, don't you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I see concrete examples of that on a daily basis, really. But in terms of training, Karen, I mean, you introduced the show there with the whole idea of talking. What do you mean?
This is the weird thing. We do talk a lot and we just chat all the time. So the dogs have to somehow, if they're going to be learning from us in a specific sense by training, their formal learning has to be filtered out of the general chit chat that humans have. So the general sort of background chit chat, or we talk to ourselves, or the radio's going, and there's lots of kind of verbal diarrhea going on. If you have a dog that lives in a very quiet environment and then you say something, obviously that's quite what we call salient, it really stands out. But quite often we'll be blah 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 blah, and we do that to the dog as well. It'll be like, oh, come on, Pickles, don't do that, come over here, blah 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 blah, and he can hear the tone of voice, but there's no specific command in there. So if you really do want to communicate in a training sense, you have to think about a signal. It's like holding up a little sign to say do this, and it needs to be clear, it needs to be obvious. It doesn't need to be loud necessarily, because that's not always going to have the desired effect, but you do need to make it very pertinent to what you're doing. And often you learn to couple it with a body signal, and that's why we start to use food or things like that to get the dog's attention. Now there are other ways to get the dog's attention which aren't very nice, of course, which we all know about. So if you want to communicate with your dog in a sort of fair, kind way, you get their attention in a nice way, unless it's an emergency and you're kind of shouting out going, please don't do that. But you try and plan ahead. You predict what you want the dog to do. You plan how you're going to get them to do it. And then you try and link whatever it is you say to that behaviour. And that is the premise of all training. It's not complicated. I don't think training is particularly hard. But I do think that getting really good at it and practicing and getting the dog to understand it and repeat it is where the real work begins. It's quite easy to teach that first little bit if you're a decent handler. And I don't want to sound like that's, me saying, oh, well, it's easy. It is quite a straightforward thing if you've got a dog that wants to do it.
Sure. I mean, I did, here in Sweden, I'm a qualified trainer, and I studied it for a year, and Hundens Hus here in Stockholm, which is a really good training place. And at the moment I'm trying to train Digby to find cantarelles, mushrooms. We get loads of them in the forests here, and I've just started training now this weekend with him, and I realise, as I hadn't thought it through before I started, I hadn't thought about my body language, and he kept sitting, and it was because something that I was doing was similar to the sit signal that I've given him. So I had to step back and go, how am I going to do this?
That's you could have done with your video again, your Big Brother style video, to look at you and go, yeah. That's why an instructor quite often helps people, because they can see it from the outside. So instructors go to instructors to help with their dogs because they can't always see what they're doing. And you've picked up on something that there is, the missing skill, if you like, of communication for dogs is scent. Digby's looking for things with his nose. How on earth do you communicate to him that you want him to start hunting for something using the skill that he has to detect a specific sort of scent? And I know that is, again, that's a possible thing to train, but you have to understand the way the dog's looking at it or sniffing at it. We can't hope to replicate the dog's ability to use scent. Even there are machines that are devised to do it, and they're getting better. But we can't even begin to imagine what that must be like. So how to communicate that? Please sniff this. If you've ever tried to teach a child to blow out birthday cake candles, you will sympathise with what I've tried to say about teaching your dog to hunt with their nose, because they can do it already. They know how to do it, but they don't know that that's what you want. And to try and get them to do it is how do you explain it? It's really hard. So you have to try and build that up.
Exactly, because one of our puppy buyers, they came by this weekend with Daisy, Digby's sister, and they're both two. They'll both be two on August 30th, and they were telling me that they were out walking, and suddenly Daisy threw herself on the ground, and they were like, "Oh oh my goodness me, there's something wrong with her. She wouldn't move. She wouldn't get up. She was lying on the ground. And then they realised she'd lain down next to a huge field of canterelles. I think that's what you call it in English, yeah?
I think chanterelle, I think it might be, but I don't know.
Chanterelles, the big yellow spongy mushrooms that are super good. So she'd lain down, and they regularly, while she's been a pup, have been, going out picking mushrooms, and she'd just gone along. And she had learned herself instinctively that you lie down next to a group of and they'd pick 3 litres.
3 litres. Wow.
I know. And with Digby, he doesn't do that. Yesterday I've been trying to train him, and we went out in the woods with him yesterday, and he decided that searching for horse poo was
well, he doesn't look for mushrooms yet. But he can. He just doesn't do it yet. But that's only a yet. I was teaching tracking the other day to a young working cocker spaniel and a client who does quite a bit of gun dog work, and we realised that she tends to rush to the nearest bit of brush rather than looking on sort of flat ground. So we decided we would teach her to get her nose really down on the ground to try and work on her skill a little bit. It absolutely chucked it down about 4 or 5 times. In fact, I was like a drowned rat by the end of it, which didn't help with the scent work at all. But we managed to get there. And it was a case of going over it very simply, setting up a very, very short track that, and she was looking for something that was her favourite thing. And we were working on, building that into the gun dog training skills that she already has. So we didn't want to take away from that. So it was a bit intricate, really, what we were planning to do. But actually, we just made it very simple for the dog. But our ultimate goal had been planned out, not on paper, but in our heads. Right, okay, this is what we're aiming for. Now we've got to make it very easy for her. And we might miss things. We could quite easily miss that our dogs found an interesting smell just because we're not used to looking for the body language. So the kind of thing that you're really looking for, particularly, ground scenting, is, they really are quite close to the ground, and it looks like they're following something drawn on the floor, but they're very intent. They have a real concentrated look, and their tail tends to thrash from side to side as a general rule. I mean, you need to learn your own dog. And obviously their mouth and nose is rapidly taking in air, but it's hard to see that because you're behind them. So you have to look for this kind of arrow effect that they have, and a sort of swishing. It's really hard to explain, but you can tell the difference. And when they're air scenting, obviously their head carriage and everything is totally different, and it's more easy to see because they're sort of almost gulping and gulping, and then
Digby,
and their head off.
I gotta say, it's like he's got loose dentures.
Oh yes, they're phlegming. That's when they're, as I understand it, pushing the sort of scent over their vomeronasal organ, which the Jacobson organ in their above their nose or sort of around their nose. But you can have a look at an anatomical diagram if you really want to see about that, because it's quite fascinating how they analyse what's going on. But yeah, and also, if you are interested in again this kind of communication level, is look which way the wind's blowing, because quite often your dog will turn into the wind, which means the wind's blowing towards you. So get used to sort of turning your head around and feeling where the wind is. And if you'll feel when it's straight on your face by turning your head away from it, turning your head back in. And if you're really struggling, pick some grass and chuck it in the air and see which way it blows. You will sort of understand all of a sudden that's why my dog keeps running off in that direction, because the wind is coming in this direction towards us, and it can smell something that's way over there. We've talked about this a little bit. Dogs can actually follow scent, even, aged scent, even on concrete. They'll follow it in the correct direction. So they'll actually follow somebody, which is just unbelievable. And John Bradshaw, who has written a fantastic book, he's written several, but In Defence of Dogs, which is this latest one, I asked him about that at the APPC conference and said, is it the age of the scent or what? And he said, we just don't know. It doesn't match the physics. How we think about it doesn't match the physics of which direction the scent has gone in. So there's something that we need to find out about there. But really looking at it from a dog's eye view is the absolute key to getting the best from your dog, whether you're training them formally or whether you just want to have a nice life with them, is understanding that. And if I could transmit that information to every owner, we probably wouldn't see anywhere near the number of problems that we do see, just because it's a case of understanding a different species. Everyone is quite critical of, they're not humans and they're not. Well, no, but it's natural as a human to just assume everyone's like we are. Of course it is. Unless someone comes and tells you otherwise, then you're not going to know. So I think we should be compassionate with people that don't understand. And I think that we should be compassionate with dogs that don't understand people. That sounds like a fair deal, don't you think?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, this whole and going back to this whole idea of the training moment and talking. When do you bring in verbal commands?
Everyone likes to do it slightly differently. I think, generally, in terms of just basic learning theory, you want to get the behavior that you're aiming at first, and then you attach your cue. So your cue would be your command, or it could be your body signal or something. And sometimes if you are lure training, so in other words, you've got something in your hand that is attractive to the dog and luring them into the position or luring them to the place you want them to be, that lure signal becomes part of your cue. So you sometimes don't want to keep that. If you are relying on verbal commands only and you don't want a hand movement, but you've taught a lure with your hand, then if you take that hand movement away, the dog isn't going to fully understand what you want again, unless you've attached a very strong verbal command to it. So, for example, if you're teaching a dog to, let's use the sit as a basic example, you have something in your hand that the dog wants, and if you move your hand upwards and towards the back of the dog's head, the dog lifts its head, and as long as it keeps its feet where they are, it will try and sit down, so because it's trying to reach the food. And as you do that a few times, you get the dog to reliably do that. Then you start to say sit when their bottom hits the ground, and then they get their reward. Then if you want to then just be saying sit and not moving your hand to lure the dog, you're going to have to gradually fade that out, because otherwise, if you suddenly just stop and start saying sit with no movement of your body, you've taken away a part of what you just taught. So the dog won't necessarily understand everything again. They might retain some, but generally they don't. And it's quite obvious to an observer that the dog is looking for more signals. And then what misinterprets it is people say the dog is being disobedient. He doesn't want to do it. He's being naughty. We must punish him. We must grab him and force him to the ground. And actually it's just incomplete training.
Are there people like that still?
I'm afraid so. Yeah. I'm afraid so. And it's certainly not the kind of thing that I would want to be doing with my dogs. And certainly I wouldn't teach my clients to do it, and not in any sort of sharp physical way. I think, you can guide dogs into places and guide them into positions very gently in a way that's not going to frighten them if they're really struggling to understand.
Yes.
But you don't need to do it in a way that frightens or upsets the dog, because when they are frightened and upset, they don't learn anything. So it's another communication thing. Well, they do learn. They just learn that you're not particularly nice, and they learn to worry about it. And then if you do get the desired result, they learn it through a sort of fear-based thing, which is not the way that I want to teach my dogs anyway. They're my pets, and I don't want them to feel like that. So,
In terms of takeaways, though, for people listening to this show that perhaps don't have the same level of training, of haven't been to courses, what sort of specific takeaways could you share?
But you know what I would do? I would just be aware that your dog is watching you. All the time. Dogs don't come and chat to each other the whole time, and they're very aware of movement. So try and work out when you move towards your dog, when you move away from your dog, or if you're doing something in the kitchen, they're observing you. And even if they're sleeping, as soon as you get up, they'll jump up, no matter how deeply asleep they are. So that I find fascinating. So I really would say to people, your dog is really watching you, just have a look out of the corner of your eye one day. Sometimes they might be sparking, they might be completely out, legs in the air. But if the doorbell goes or the phone goes, they're up, and if you're going to the fridge, they seem to have this sixth sense. And also if you are scraping plates or anything that has a big reward attached to it, they're going to watch you more carefully. So, but have a think about your dog's eye view. Bear in mind that they are lower down than you are, on the ground. They're down, sort of low below you. It's very unlikely your dog's going to be taller than you, even if you have a very large dog. So just think, what are they looking at? And if you really want to get silly about it, and I mean, fun silly, shut your dog out of the room, because you'll get a face full of dog otherwise. But, get down on all fours and just have a little peek round your lounge and see what they're looking at. Can you hear my dogs now?
I can.
No.
Who's that?
That's all of them.
All of them checking in there. Well, Karen, should we get on to the interview?
Yes, we have a brilliant interview with Deborah Meaden. As I said at the start, she is a well-known investor, entrepreneur. She decides whether she wants to invest in businesses on Dragon's Den, which is a television program over here in the UK. Now, Deborah has a very straightforward, no-nonsense approach. It's something that I really admire in her. She has Hungarian Vizslas, and I wanted to talk to her about the breed because they've become very popular. So we felt, I met her at the Dogs Trust Honours. We had a bit of a chat about it, and we both felt that it was really important that people know what they're getting into when they see a beautiful dog like that. Do they really know what they're getting? So she's an experienced owner, and I very much enjoyed talking to her. Well, today I'm delighted to welcome investor and successful entrepreneur Deborah Meaden onto the show after we met when Deborah was presenting at the Dogs Trust Honours Awards. Now, everyone recognises Deborah from her time on Dragon's Den, but not as well known is Deborah's love for animals, with horses, dogs, a cat, chickens and ducks. And in particular, Deborah and I had a brief chat about her dogs, Hungarian Vizslas, of which she has 3, and the specific needs for this active breed. Now, Deborah, welcome to the show.
Hello there.
Now, you must have come across a lot of new ideas and innovations in business, but, on Dragon's Den, what are the best and the worst dog business or product ideas that you've ever seen?
Oh, I think, let me think. I've actually seen some fantastic dog products in Dragon's Den. But I'm not a great one for too much bling. And there was somebody who came in with sort of doggy sunglasses, which you could bling them up. And, I just think animals should be allowed to be animals. And I think putting sunglasses on them is not a terribly good idea.
No, I imagine they tried to tell you that the dogs needed it for some reason. But I guess dogs must handle it themselves.
Well, yes, and I think dogs are very compliant. They want to do what pleases you, but that doesn't mean to say they like it. And like I say, I just think animals need to be left to be animals, really.
Yeah, absolutely. What's the most useful dog gadget that you've got, or a product?
Oh, definitely my whistle.
Oh, really?
Although my dogs they have GPS tracking, so that because they do sort of go out and about, but yeah, so they have a collar with GPS tracking on.
Oh, that's a device on the collar. Yes, I know. I think someone asked me about that not long ago, and they weren't sure if it was. Are they quite large devices, or do they sort of fit quite snugly?
No, these are quite snug. No, they're pretty good. They're pretty good. They're not too bulky. I worried about them being too big and getting caught in somewhere. But no, these are very good.
They're a very good idea, particularly if you want to give your dog the freedom they deserve. Now, Alan Sugar is famously saying in the latest series of The Apprentice that if he wanted a best friend, he'd get a dog. They keep repeating that soundbite, and it makes me smile every time. Do you think that dogs are better friends than co-workers?
No. I mean, I absolutely love my animals, but I'm very aware of the fact that they are my animals, and I think there can be a danger in trying to treat them too much like humans, and I absolutely, whilst I love my animals, I know the difference between my animals and my friends.
Now, you're well known in Dragon's Den for advising people to spend more time researching their business pitches and being thorough, and that's obviously very important in business. But when you came to choose your choice of breed as a dog, and the puppy, what did you do? How did you research all of that?
Well, we were very clear. I mean, we took a look at our own lifestyle. In fact, we wanted a dog for a very long time, but our lifestyle didn't allow it. I was very busy working, even where we were living. It was more confined. So it wasn't really until we felt that we were able to offer not just our dogs, but our animals the life that they should have, that we actually got a dog. I mean, I'm very lucky. I spend my time between London and the country, but the dogs stay in the country. And then when we had the space, we just took a long, hard look at our lives, and it wasn't about what the dog looked like. It wasn't about, we wanted the cutest and the cuddliest. We just thought, actually, how will we best live together with this animal? And once we decided that, we literally got the book, the dog book, and then we talked to people and said, because there's one thing reading in a book, but there's nothing like speaking to an owner to say, actually, what are those dogs really like? What's the upside? And there's no perfect dog, so what's the downside? And then you can make sure that you can actually manage any of the more difficult issues.
Absolutely. And obviously one dog can be a challenge for many owners. You've got more than one, so what made you decide to get more? And I know you chose Vizslas, so what sort of formed the foundation to that decision?
Well, we only got one in the first instance, because I think, again, it's very important that you know what you're getting into, and I think that sometimes getting 2 dogs or 3 dogs, actually some of the issues that arise are not down to the dogs, it's down to the fact you've got 3 of them. So before we jumped straight in, we got our first dog, and we learnt a lot together. He grew up with us, we learnt how to be with him, and then when we were confident that we understood the breed, then we actually, we got our second dog. And our third dog is a rehome, from a very nice family, who love their animals, but Vizslas were just too much for them, and they are a handful.
And they are increasingly popular. I mean, I was sort of hoping that you could let people know a little bit more about their true natures. Obviously, your experience with them now. Do you think that they enjoy companionship?
Well, I actually I worry about Vizslas at the moment. They're very good-looking dogs. They're extremely affectionate. They look fantastic, and also we had a cross winner, and all of those things can come together for people thinking, oh, I'd love a Vizsla. And they are lovely, lovely dogs, but they're lovely dogs in the right circumstances. They're extremely sensitive. They are very, very, I only have to look at my dogs wrong and they start shaking. So they're very sensitive. They need a lot of exercise. Our dogs are happy when they've had a run. If our dogs don't get a couple of hours a day, then they start getting fretty. When they start getting fretty, they start doing things wrong. And we've got one of our dogs, the rehome in particular, who literally just gets himself into a downhill spiral, and you can't stop it because you can't tell him off. He does something wrong. He knows he's done something wrong. He goes all cowery. It's horrible to watch. So on the upside of Vizslas, I mean, they are fantastic companions. They're very bright, they're very loyal, they're always there and thereabouts, and whilst I take them out into the open countryside and they run, they're always watching. They're sight hounds, so they're always looking back to me. They want to know where I am, so they're not they don't run off into the distance, never to be seen again. They're lovely dogs, but they're lovely dogs in the right situation.
So really would you agree that probably they're working dogs with powerful instincts, but they've also got enormous sensitivity? So that's a bit of a conundrum, don't you think?
Well, it is a conundrum. I mean, actually, the history of the Hungarian Vizsla is they were noblemen's dogs, so they were noblemen's hunting dogs. And that meant in Hungary that instead of being the dogs that lived outside, they lived inside with their owners. So that's where I think that combination comes in. That makes them very close, very tuned into their owners. But it also means that they need to work hard. Now, my dogs we don't shoot, we don't work them, but what we do instead is we run them. We have lots of space, and when we go out for a walk, there's a lot of acres around us, and those dogs are allowed to run. And they're working all the time themselves. We don't need to work them. They're constantly chasing butterflies or anything that moves. In fact, it doesn't matter to them.
Yeah, so sometimes that can have its own downside, can't it? I mean, do you think that if you were looking at advising someone on the most successful way forward, do you think that Vizslas need a lot of formal training?
Well, our dogs didn't really have formal training. We worked it out with them, but I do think, bearing in mind that they're very difficult to discipline because they're so sensitive, that actually catching them very early and teaching the rules very, very early is, I think, quite important, because then it avoids problems later. Although we didn't put our dogs through formal training, we took a lot of time with our dogs. And I think our first dog, in particular, we learnt a lot through our first dog. I mean, hopefully he's grown up into a well-balanced grown-up. But we were learning. But I do think that formal training can help. I think dogs need to be trained for the thing that they're going to do. And what we do with our dogs, we don't take them into the towns. We don't work them. They socialise, they play with other dogs, but they don't have to heel to my, they don't have to be within 1 inch of my leg when we're walking along. I need them to come back when I whistle. That's what I need my dogs to do.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I was going to ask you what sort of skills, what important skills do you need to teach them? But in a nutshell, are you saying really, well, it's what, apart from taking into account what their nature is, of course, but, it's what you need them to be, perhaps?
Absolutely. Everybody's got to think about their own lifestyles, and they need to train their dogs. Now, I think Vizslas would not be happy overtrained. I think they'd be fine if they were trained to hunt, but I should think maybe living in a city where they can only walk, where they can only go to heel, where they're always on lead. I don't think I'd like to see a Vizsla in that type of situation. I think they need lots and lots of space. My dogs, they need to be able to not jump up. That is, Vizslas have these, all Vizsla owners that I know have an issue with their dogs jumping up because they want to get close to you. They want to connect with you, and they, that all goes on in your face. So they jump up. They are slightly crotch sniffy, or they're very crotch sniffy actually, because they're kind of at that height. They get a lot of information from there, and I spend my life saying to people, I'm really terribly, especially the Rehown one, I'm terribly, terribly sorry, but it'll stop it now. And so they do that. But I need my dogs to come back and so when they're in danger, I need to be able to get them under control, or when they actually look like they're chasing deer or whatever it is, I need to be able to bring them back, and that's what I require of my
I'm
dog.
Absolutely, that I'm thrilled to hear you say that, and the reason is because you've basically said nipping it in the bud is going to help, and teaching them early, which is what we'd say about, well, in fact, all dogs, and would save an awful lot of problems if we didn't wait for the problems to arrive and then try and correct them afterwards, which I suppose is an ideal situation. But I mean, with the breed itself, I know that the the Kennel Club register has shown that the numbers of registered Vizsla pups have increased dramatically over the last 10 years, and they are beautiful dogs. But what do you feel about dog owners who, potentially judging on looks alone?
Oh, I think looks alone is a very dangerous thing when choosing a dog. In fact, to me, it's looks last. Whilst we all have an image of the animal that we want, you have got to live with that animal, and that animal's got to live with you. And for it to be a happy partnership, what is much more important than the way they look is their characteristics. It's no different to a human being. Do you know, there was, I think it was Arthur Miller said that a beautiful woman, after you've married her for a beautiful woman after 2 months, you stop seeing their beauty and you start seeing their personality, and that's the same with animals. You have got to live with a personality. It's not about the looks, and it really, really worries me. Now, I think my dogs are beautiful. Whether they are or not, it doesn't matter. I love my dogs. They look beautiful when I look at them. And to me, the most important thing is the way they are. What I love about my dogs is the way they are. I love their personalities, and we get on well together. That's much, much more important. It's no different to a marriage. Much, much more important. You get on well together. You love each other. That's the most important thing.
And you're compatible. That's the interesting part, isn't it?
Absolutely. It works. It works in our lifestyle. My husband is home all of the time with our dogs. They need company, and they are out and about with him, even in wet weather. They hate it. They hate the rain. But they're out and about. They're by his side all of the time. He'll be in the vegetable garden. They'll be out in the vegetable garden having a good old sniff around with him. And we rub along very well together.
And obviously they have each other.
They absolutely have each other. Although with dogs, there's that whole pecking order thing that they have to sort out a little bit.
So would you say then that a Vizsla's appearance can be quite deceptive?
I don't know. I think, when you see a fit Vizsla, I think it says it all, really. We spent the earliest years of their lives worrying about them being too thin, because they're quite greyhoundy. Our boys are really quite greyhoundy. And I used to take them out and say very loudly, thank goodness they had shiny eyes and shiny coats, but I used to worry that people would think that I was underfeeding the dogs, because, they look what they are. They are very, very fit looking dogs, and I've completely forgotten the question.
Would you say that a Vizsla's appearance can be deceptive?
All right, sorry. Yeah.
Do you want to start again? Should we start again?
Say
okay,
again.
I'll ask you again. So, would you say that a Vizsla's appearance can be deceptive?
Well, I actually think Vizslas tend to look the dogs that they are. I mean, our dogs are very greyhounded. They look very fit. They look very intelligent. So I'm not sure they are deceptive. What I do think is that some people look at them and think, what beautiful dogs. They don't read what type of dogs they are.
Yeah, and that's something that I think it goes back to looks and judging on looks again. But I think sometimes I look after Visa myself, and she is a very sensitive girl, and she looks like she's super confident until you overdo it slightly, and it doesn't have to be much. And so her sort of forthcoming appearance is quite confident.
That is very true. That is very true. I would agree that Vizslas, and my boys, they will defend me till if somebody comes in that they don't know about. And one of them, the top dog, he is a super confident dog because he's top dog. But the other two, as I say, you only have to throw a look at them and they think, oh no, what have I done wrong? Because they're very, very eager to please.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's very easy to sort of break through that and turn that confidence into kind of, oh, what have I done wrong?
Yeah, so bearing that in mind, I mean, if you were to advise a Vizsla owner, what would the most disastrous thing they could do? What would that be?
Oh, well, I don't advocate slapping dogs anyway. I must be honest. I mean, there's times when we all feel like it. But I think you have to be very careful even on your voice with a Vizsla owner. I think you have to be very assertive, but actually going to the point of shouting can be very worrying for a Vizsla.
And probably prove counterproductive.
Absolutely. The thing what I say about, I watch them, particularly with our rehome, I just watch them get themselves into a pickle. They don't want to upset you. They're completely in tune with you. And if they've made you angry, they can get worse and worse and worse. And it's funny with our little one, he just, once we've told him off about one thing, it's like he finds everything that he knows is wrong and he goes and does it. And you've just got to stand back and just say, calm down. It's okay. Just calm down.
It's like you said,
and that's quite a tall order when you've got three of them. It's quite a tall order.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But you know the end result. If the end result you want to make the situation better, then you need to forget about how irritated you're feeling and just try and help your dog out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that applies to all dogs, I would say, as well, that, it's better not to confront because it just causes problems. So, obviously you are a successful investor, a successful entrepreneur. If someone wanted to invest in a Vizsla, what would your final advice be to them? Well, I would do my research, no different to what I say about a business. I would do my research, that is in terms of reading, and try and find a Vizsla owner or speak to the Hungarian Vizsla Society about the actual characteristics of a dog, not just the characteristics, but whether or not there's any health issues with a dog, with Vizsla, so that you can manage them for the best lives that they can possibly have. I think I would certainly consider my own situation, my environment. Am I able to make sure that this dog is a healthy, happy dog? Because an unhappy Vizsla is a complete handful, and I should think could be a nightmare. So really think long and hard about, is my situation the right situation to have a Vizsla in? If it is, I'm going to end up with a lovely dog. If it isn't, we are going to end up with problems because they are incredibly sensitive, incredibly perceptive to their surroundings. And if they don't get the exercise and the time that they need, they can also be very, very destructive. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been terrific talking to you.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it.
Well, thank you for doing that, Karen. That was good. When did you speak to her?
It was a couple of weeks ago now. Isn't she, like dream dog owner in lots of ways, in that, she's so no nonsense and she's so honest about things and she's very good humoured about it as well. But I think, that's the kind of owner that you'd want if you were a dog, I reckon.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in terms of, as someone who's sold pups to people, as we were talking about this weekend, sometimes you instinctively know when someone is you are never going to let a dog go into their care, and that's the kind of person that you really want your dogs to go to. That's exactly it.
Yeah, you'd be really happy that they were going to be very honest, very no nonsense, very kind, and actually, the way that Deborah sort of accepts the dogs as they are, accepts the reality of the fact that they are animals and they're not going to be magic transformed into something we want them to be. We have to meet somewhere in the middle.
Exactly. All right then, Karen, shall we wrap the show up for this week?
Yeah, I'd especially like to thank Beverly Cuddy from Dogs Today, she's the editor, because the interview with Deborah is actually going to be in the magazine as well. So if you want it all written down, then it's in the magazine. And, but Beverly gave us special permission to use this for the podcast. So thank you so much, Beverly, for that.
And of course, podcasts can be time shifted. So someone could be listening to this episode in 2 months' time. So which month's episode is that article coming out in?
I think it will be October,
Okay.
Which is 2012.
Mm-hmm. And that magazine's available in the UK. It's available in Sweden because I've seen it in the stores here too.
Get it on iPad as well. You can get it online. So if you wanted to get yourself a copy and have a little read, then if you search the App Store, and I'm not sure if it's the Dogs Today app alone, but if you go to the Dogs Today website, which is todaymagazine.co.uk, there are lots and lots of ways to get it. But yeah, iPad is lovely.
All right. Well, then let's wrap the show up then. And if you want to contact Karen, you can find her on Twitter, and she's twitter.com/wildpaw. And you can find me at twitter.com/John Buskell. And that's Digby drinking some water in the background there. Or you can send us an email, podcast@intellidogs.com. And we'd love it if you went along to iTunes and wrote us a review. That's really, really a great way of helping us to spread and share the information, the enthusiasm that we have and that we know you have for promoting a good life with our dogs. And remember, if you're looking for more in-depth training advice, why not build your own training manual tailored to your own needs? And that's, you can do that over at Karen's website, which is at intellidogs.com. And yes, of course, do go along to the website and you'll find the opportunity to leave some voicemail. If you've got a microphone associated with your computer, put that microphone on, get your dog barking, or give us a comment, say hello, tell us where in the world you are, tell us a story about your dog. We'd love to get you involved. And of course, you can always record messages on your smartphone as well. I think that's about it, isn't it, Karen?
It is. Yes, thank you, John. Just to say, I mentioned my book. Sorry, I should have said it's on pre-order at the moment. You can get it on Amazon online, and it's called What Your Dog Wants. 7 Key Skills of a Perfect Dog Owner. But it's on pre-order, so copies are out on the 1st of October. But I will be signing copies at Pat's in Harrogate on the Colloway stand very soon, so I will have more information about that, and we'll be able to talk to Gabriella at Colloway's very soon as well about Walk in the Dark, which is where you get the opportunity to organise a walk for charity. It's for search dogs. I'll tell you more about that on the next podcast, and we'll speak to Gabriella as well, because that is a really fantastic doggy charity event.
All right then, Karen, I'll speak to you next time.
John.